Hi everyone. Welcome back to EDU 390. I'm going to have several videos for you this week. I'm a little late getting them up, but it's been a crazy week, and today is the Thursday, February 13th, and as you all know, we're anticipating a snowstorm. And as I'm sitting here in my living room, it's just now starting to snow outside. So this is a good project for me today to get these all done. I've spent some time with your text this week, and I'm not going to go do a PowerPoint like I did last week with excerpts, but I just want to say that your reading is really going to help support your work in this course. Each one of those textbooks gives a great deal of information, both in content delivery and in instructional strategies, learning theories, and all those things. So it's really going to be important for you to read those carefully. Integrate what you're reading in your textbooks with what the resources I'm giving you, and then share with one another because I'm finding, again, this is what I've found over and over again, is that the strategies in the content areas are applicable across disciplines. They really are. And I was reading in the science textbook about, the science is an inquiry, and that absolutely is, but so are all the other topics and other disciplines. Inquiry is so important. And then I was reading about discovery-based learning, and that can be incorporated in all our disciplines too. So it's really just a matter of being mindful of these various methodologies for teaching, and not to get stuck in one particular mode. So anyway, this little video is going to be about standards. It's important for us to remember that when we design our units, our lessons, we have to start with the end in mind. What is it that we want students to know and be able to do? And this is where we go to our standards. And depending on your discipline, it will depend on which standards you go to. Standards are generally procedural knowledge. These are things that we want students to be able to do. But there's also some declarative knowledge as well, what we want them to know. And those really go hand in hand. And I'll talk a bit about that later. But now I just want us to explore the standards briefly. You have them all anyway on the syllabus for your particular discipline. And you should have by now spent some time with those if you have not already. And thinking about, what is it that I want students to be able to do and to know, okay? So I've got my launch pad working here so that I can, whoops, sorry, the wrong one, so I can open each one of these documents at the same time. And you'll notice that my desktop has my little dog on it, so you'll get to see her as well. So let's begin with ELA, because that's the first one that comes up here. And notice that it says, and literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. So the literacy portion of this particular document is pertinent to all of you. And technical subjects is code for mathematics. So even you mathematics people are going to have to pay attention to the literacy standards here. But for now, let's just concentrate on the ELA. And so there's a lot to read here. I'm going to just skip down through all of this, and I'm going to go right to high school, even though you'll be wanting to look at that middle level as well, which is 6th through 8. I'm going to scroll down. Sorry if I'm giving you a headache. All right, so we back up here, and there are standards for English language arts, and there are reading standards, okay? And you'll see there are the anchor standards there, which are important. But even more important is to get down here to the performance indicators. Now this is grades 6 through 8. So I'm going to scroll, keep going. And then we have standards for writing. Again, there are 10 of them here. And then there are also standards for language. Okay, speaking and listening comes next, and there are 6 anchor standards here. And then there's language, and there are 6 there as well, okay? And they're the same for high school. So we get up to high school, and we have the same anchor standards for all of these, but then we have different performance indicators. So I'm going to go to the writing just because I want to do that. And so we have here the writing standards for 6 through 8, 9 through 10, 11 through 12. So they're grouped into categories. The reason I have these highlighted is because I was working with another course and helping them to look at particular pieces of the standard that helps them to think about how they're going to create assessments, okay? But you'll notice here, that we have this right arguments focused on discipline-specific content, all right? So these are for literacy, okay? We're now into the literacy standards here. So if you're doing a paper in science, then we have to look carefully at the literacy standards to see how we're going to integrate those as well, okay? All right, so here we have all these different standards for literacy. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here in the writing. All right, so you're going to have to look carefully at what you want students to know and be able to do. Okay, I'm going to back up into the ELA. Um, Let me just back up a little bit more here. I want to get to the writing for ELA. Because I want you to notice that the anchor standards are the same. All right? So the anchor standards are the same for writing, whether it's for ELA or for literacy, or for the content areas. So it's important for us to be able to look at these carefully. Okay? All right. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a second. And then let's look at social studies, okay? The social studies are part and parcel of the main learning results, the original ones, or the second iteration of them, I guess. And again, we have these key ideas here, and then we're going to go down and we'll see how they're situated. So the social studies standards are again broken down into categories of grade level: pre-K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to diploma. Notice diploma doesn't necessarily mean 12, okay? And then we have the larger anchor standards across the top. I'm just going to scroll down. All right, again here. And then I want you to pay attention to the way that these standards are written in terms of what we're asking students to be able to do. The one I wanted to get is here. So I'm looking at B3, which is individual, cultural, international, and global connections in civics and government. Notice how in the lower grades, they're asking them to identify and compare to their classroom traditions. So it's more inclusive of looking at the classroom traditions. And then we get up to 3 to 5. Now we're looking at the United States in general, and we're still identifying. And then when we get to 6 to 8, we're asking students to explain. And now we're looking at basic constitutional, political, and civil aspects of historical and or current issues. All right. When we get to 9 to diploma, we're asking them to analyze. So you can see the skill building going up through the standards. This is the spirit of all standards, but we know that not all students who enter grade 9 have all these skills. So even a grade 9 teacher is going to have to be cognizant of what the standard is before the 9 through diploma, because you may have to be recursive about going back and refreshing students' memories or helping them build these skills they may not have. So it's important to understand the standards across the disciplines and not just to look at the grade that you're teaching, okay? So this is what the social studies standards look like, and this is where you'll want to go to think about what you want students to do. And you'll want to look carefully at the anchor standards and then at the individual performance indicators, okay? All right, so I'm going to take that back. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong one, sorry. And then I'm going to look at visual arts. And again, this is the parameters for essential instruction, which are the main learning results. They're set up the same way at social studies because all of the MLRs were set up that way. So that we have, again, looking at pre-K 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, then 9 to diploma. And we look at these broad standards, okay? These are performing. I'm going to get down to the visual. Okay, so here's visual. The elements of art and principles of design. And again, look at the verbs. Identify, then we describe, then compare, and evaluate. So again, we're building those skills up through there. But again, think about when we get to this evaluate elements of art, we have to make sure they know what they are first. That is just because they were taught in pre-K2 doesn't mean that the student's going to have all of that. That's where the scaffolding and building of knowledge come in, all right? So that's our visual and performing arts. And then let's look at next-gen science standards. The state of Maine has not yet officially adopted the next-gen science standards, but they will. There hasn't been time in the legislative sessions to do so, and it's not going to be acted on in this session either. I checked to find out. But most schools are going forward on the principle that they will be adopted. So I'm going to, instead of looking at the main learning results, I am going to ask you to look at this. I find that these standards incredibly difficult to read. Maybe you don't, but I do. And I'm going to scroll down and get to, that's grade 4, 5th grade. I'm going to get down to middle school. Okay, middle school physical science. Okay, And so here's some material that really needs to be read so you can understand these and how they're put together. But when we get down to the actual graphics here, sorry, I'm just going to keep scrolling. I know I'm getting ahead. Okay. So we have these broad standards. So here we have structure and property of matter, and there are 3 of them here for middle school. All right, and the black is what the standard is. These boxes are the frameworks from which these standards were drawn, okay? So the science and engineering principles, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. On the web page, you can actually have the PDF in different colors so that you can see which pieces of this and which pieces of this and which pieces of this went into composing these standards. Um, the red after is clarification. So it gives, so if the standard is, I'm going to look at this one here, develop models to describe atomic composition of simple molecules and extended structures. Here the clarification is the emphasis is on developing models of molecules that vary in complexity. Examples could be. So they give you examples. Assessment does not include. So there's lots of supporting sentences and language to help you think about this. And they're also giving you connections to other content standards. So here are connections to the literacy standards. Remember I told you these are going to be important for all of you. The next gen science standards go above and beyond and connect them, which is really good. Also connects them to the mathematics standards. So it really will help science teachers to think about how, if I'm going to be teaching students to these standards, these are ways that these are the standards for literacy and math that I can include as well, okay? So notice here we have site-specific textual evidence. We have gather relevant information from multiple prints and digital sources. These are the literacy standards. And we also have the mathematics, okay? So that's it for this next gen. You're going to want to spend some time with these, again, because there's a lot going on here that you're going to need to pay attention to. And then we have the mathematics. I cued in on math grade 7 because I wanted you to really understand that, 7 and 8 are separated, but high school is lumped together, all right? But it gives you a lot of information here in terms of, the broader ideas for these standards, and then the overview of what we're asking students to be able to do and know in terms of 7th grade. And you can see it's broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 different aspects of mathematics. And then over here, mathematical practices. Okay, so this is the piece that's all the buzz in the conversation around standards, and particularly around mathematics, is that we're not only teaching students content, but we're teaching them how to use it in real life, to practice it, to see how it works, and what goes on. So it's not just teaching the stuff, it's teaching how this stuff works in the real world and how mathematics are practiced in the real world. And then we have the actual standards and performance indicators, and we get to grade 8, the same thing. We get some information, important, and we get it broken down again into an overview with the mathematical practices to the side, and then the standards are broken down for us. When we get to high school, we don't have as much front material to read, but a lot of standards to pay attention to, okay? Notice this plus here. This means that the common math, this symbol, excuse me, all standards without a plus symbol should be in the common mathematics curriculum for all career and college ready students. Standards without a plus symbol may also appear in courses intended for all students. So they've sort of given some guidance there about what should be included. And we have it broken down into these categories. Modeling is really important here, okay? So we have a whole separate piece for modeling, which I'll look at in a second. But then we have the information, and again, we have each component broken down so that we have number and quantity overview with the individual standards. Then we have algebra, that's broken down with the standards, and so forth and so on, and so it goes on. And high school standards are lumped together. They're not parsed out into grades because the creators of the standards have left that up to schools as to how do they sequence mathematics courses so that students will get these standards, but will also get them in a connected way. I'm going to stop at the modeling one because I think this is really important. And I think it's important for us to look at this. Modeling links classroom mathematics and statistics to everyday life, work, and decision making. So very important. You know, I went through school 4 years of mathematics and never really understood why I was doing it and how it connected. But I really appreciate that that's included in these standards, and I appreciate that math teachers are paying attention to this, as all teachers should, in connecting their discipline to the real world and helping students to understand how this is used in the real world. Okay. Again, boy, I keep hitting the wrong one. I really apologize. So I think I've hit them all here. And we've looked at the 5 different content areas. And so that's really all I wanted to talk about in this little particular video, is just making sure you knew where to find the standards and what you do with them. So you may have a project you want students to do, and sometimes you start with a project in mind. So I want to have students reenact, you know, some aspect of history. Well, that's great. Okay, so what standards fit with that? And then, you know, and then you have to think about how you're going to assess that. Or you may be thinking about, you really want students to do a research project. Wonderful. But now look at the standards to see what standards are going to fit with that, okay? Um, so you're not being in a classroom. I mean, some of you are, but most of you are not. You're pre-service teachers, you're aspiring teachers. You're going to have to choose where you want to situate your unit. So are you thinking about 7th grade, 8th grade? You're thinking about 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th? Are you thinking about honors, introductory? Remember that there's lots of stratifications of students. And while we like to think tracking doesn't happen, it does. So you might want to think, are you teaching in a developmental course, an advanced course, et cetera, okay? Excuse me. So that's all I want to say for this little particular video. I'll be back with some others as we continue to look at some other things for our continuing work here.